welcome to the New Leaders in Action series, Looking Ahead. I'm Robin Termingham of the Olderhood Group, and with me today is Olderhood CEO Bill Storie. And today we're talking about taking early retirement. Bill, this is really quite a double-edged sword when you really stop and think about it, isn't it?
Hi, Robin. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think a lot of people, perhaps most people, always want to talk about taking early retirement, especially when they get into age 50, 55-ish, maybe, a little bit later. It's always a discussion point. It doesn't necessarily mean that people make a decision there and then, but I think a lot of people like to talk about it. But you see, there's two types or methods or categories, perhaps, of taking early retirement. One is by choice, and the other one is by force. So in other words, by choice obviously means that you've decided to take early retirement, and we'll talk about some of the aspects of that in a few minutes. But the other one, by force, is where for some reason you're laid off, or the company folds up or something, and you are laid off, and you maybe can't get a job, so therefore you're forced into retirement. So the key word, obviously, if you take early retirement by choice, is to be prepared. But if there is a possibility that you're aware of that you may be laid off over the next few months or whatever, it just makes good sense to do some preparation regardless. You may not need it in terms of taking early retirement, but it just makes some good sense to say, well, you never know, things may change.
I think people's attitudes towards early retirement sort of swings back and forth as they progress through their careers. I mean, we all start our careers thinking that we're going to be vice presidents by the time that we're 40, that we're going to retire early, that we're going to cruise around the world, or at least we used to talk that way. And then, when life gets real and you have kids in college and mortgages you're trying to pay off, and maybe you are tired of doing the same thing, but that's not meaning that it's maybe realistic to actually think about early retirement. I think this is the sort of subject that you should bring up at the dinner table at least once every year or so, and just sort of see how everybody is feeling about this.
Yeah, I think what happens is that circumstances of life overtake that type of thinking. In other words, maybe when you're in your, as you say, your 30s or 40s, etc., you quite happily would like to talk about, in 10 years' time, when I'm 50 or whatever, I'm going to take early retirement. And I think as a conversation piece, that's fine. But the reality of life kicks in, because you start to, you want to buy a house, you've got a family coming along, you need a new car, you've got things to do, which requires money. And that money, which in some respects you would otherwise think, well, I'll save this for my retirement, disappears. Because we call it save and spend. In other words, you save for something, a big ticket item, and then you spend. In other words, you buy. So I think there is a point in time between, age 30, 35 to 45, 50, maybe even up to 55, where the notion of early retirement is nothing more than that. It's a notion. There is no way that you're realistically going to take early retirement anytime soon, because your life responsibilities are kicking in all over the place.
And life has a way of throwing you a curveball. Sometimes you can feel like you're thinking about early retirement because you feel like you have no choice, rather than you simply have been laid off. things like your health can become a real factor. Can you keep up the pace that you've been going at? Perhaps it's the health of the person that you live with. Do they require more of your attention? Do you need to be there for them more than you previously did? There's an awful lot of things to consider. And Bill, you're our financial guru, but I always think it's a good idea to play the game, what would happen if? And, figure out mathematically, where are you at in your retirement financial planning if you had to retire in a year or two?
Well, there's no question but what that's probably the biggest question that people want to address in terms of discussion regarding early retirement. Will I have enough money to retire? And, let's point out something here, which is a very simple point, that at age, let's say 60, let's just use that as the number, okay? At age 60, you've potentially got another half of your life at that age, namely 30 years, to go. In other words, longevity, medical benefits, etc., that have, technology and so forth that has changed, improved over the last several years, very possible. You could live to 90. Well, 90 looks, quite a distance ahead, but it's 30 years on top of 60, which is half of your life so far. That's a big number. So when people talk about, I wonder if I have enough to retire, I wonder that sometimes they're not cognizant or aware, or they maybe just don't appreciate that, taking early retirement too early because of that 30 years, using my example, that's a critical decision in terms of how much money do you need to retire.
And also, I would imagine if you've made the wrong financial decisions about how to enact your retirement finances, I think you could run yourself into an awful lot of hot water. If longevity runs in your family, is an annuity with a fixed end date a good idea for you?
Well, that's right. And, I don't want to go into the pension issues at the moment, but certainly you're right. Whether do you take an annuity to live with you for the rest of your life, or do you do some drawdown schedule, something like that? Those are critically important decisions, because, the fact is that what happens if you run out of money? What happens if you get to age 70, 75, 80, whatever, and not only do you run out of money, which is bad enough, but you run out of lifestyle capability. The things that you just want to keep doing, you can't, because you've run out of money. Mm-hmm. So I think the question that people should ask is, do I take early retirement today, as it were, or is that just a bit too early? Because another simple fact is that once you take that early retirement, your income, your job income stops. It stops. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the month, when you get X number of dollars dropped into your bank account, last month ain't going to happen this month. It stops. That is an awakening call that terrorizes people, because all of a sudden they're going to have to hope that their investment income and or their pension income is going to be enough. The number of people who get to age 55, and this is a fact, the number of people who get to age 55 or 60 who have not done income forecasting and expense forecasting, budgeting if you prefer, who haven't done that, is staggering. It's a staggering percentage of people who just don't do that.
I don't really understand this one, because you don't get a mortgage for a house without figuring out if you can afford it and how long it's going to take you to pay it off. So why do people embark on the idea of retirement without figuring out if they can afford it?
Because it's very simple. People don't like to use the word retirement. And all through this series, we're going to annoy people, because we are going to use the retirement word. Now, maybe years ago, maybe your parents or your grandparents, when they talked about retirement, they talked about age 65 retiring, and with the best will in the world, because of health and situations like that, they maybe weren't going to live too much longer, unfortunately. But those days have changed. Those days have gone. There is now the very, very strong possibility, as we just said a few minutes ago, that you could live another 20 or 30 years. So if you don't like the word retirement, call it something else. But please recognize that there is a time when you are going to stop, and whether that's by taking early retirement or just regular, mandatory, whatever it may be, type of retirement, be very clear about what your income is going to be and obviously what your expenses are going to be.
Absolutely, because as you always say, there is life beyond the arithmetic, and you want to make sure that you're able to enjoy all the free time that you're about to have. You've been watching Leaders in Action Looking Ahead. If you have a comment or a question about the series, you can reach out to us at Bill, that's BILL, at olderhood.com. And if you're interested in learning a lot more about retirement, you can check out our book, The Third Journey, which is available on Amazon.com. We look forward to chatting with you again soon. Take care, everyone.